I think most of you will know the video, so the video itself is not new. The interesting part is how to connect it with the mode model. So that anyway, this is the starting point. You have the interaction with the mother and the child in a typical resonant way. So that's what we see in the first part.
She gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her.
And that's the first significant interaction, because when you see the child, which role does the child take when it points at the cameraman? Fine. I can help you. What I offer to the clients is there are basically only 3 roles taken from a biological model that we call from the dogs. Finally, you have a top dog trying to push his agenda through. You have an underdog submitting to stay connected, and you have the third option is the no dog position trying to get out, which is withdrawal or avoidance. So which role does the child take out of these 3 when it points?
A dominant.
It's a dominant, exactly. It's a dominant and active position. And that's a small detail, but what I introduce to the couple is, don't think in black and white patterns. Think in terms of a dimensional polarity. And even if I take a very friendly, active role, it's still active. It's still the red side. Red doesn't begin with yelling. Red means taking the initiative, getting active. Trying to get your agenda through up to dominating. So it's a spectrum. The pink part is taking the initiative, getting active. Somewhere along the way, you get more prescriptive, more demanding, and at the end, a deep red is the dominant bully. Okay, so the child is just taking the lead a little bit, so the child gets active. The mother is requested to follow, and she does. So she takes the opposite role. She goes into submission. And the blue side, the submissive side, starts with friendly cooperation, sacrificing something or offering something, and at the end, you sacrifice yourself. So that's the dimension of light blue, intermediate, deep blue. Yes. Cooperative, offering something, and then finally sacrificing yourself. But now, just in the next sequence, things turn around.
Play with her. They're working to
now the mother gets
coordinate
active.
Their emotions.
And what is the expectation of the mother when the mother gets active and starts teasing or caressing the foot of the child? What is the expectation towards the child? What should the child do? So now the mother's active, and the child, when the child smiles to the mother, the child goes onto the blue leg because it's responsive. And that's an important part to introduce to the couple. It's not about the extremes, it's about the inclination, getting more on the red leg or getting more on the blue leg. And then the best part is, if it's reciprocal, you change the roles alter. And that's the name of the game of a good life situation, because everybody's happy. If you look at both of these, of the mother and the child, they're both happy with it. And that's what a good relationship is about. Leading, following in a very gentle, alternating way. And that's what we all like. So it's not about a rigid situation. It's about flexibility, oscillating between giving and taking, leading, following, talking, listening, interrupting, apologizing. That's what we do all through our life, that we balance the interpersonal situation in this flexible, resonant way. And as long as we're resonant, flexible, and reactive to the other person, responsive, that's fine. If you make a mistake, if you step on somebody's foot, you apologize, and they will say, okay, don't do it again. Yeah, you say, no, never. And that's okay, that's no problem. If you fix it immediately, if you get a signal that you have been too dominant and you apologize, blue leg, everything's fixed within a few seconds. And that's what good couples do. They remain reactive to the signals of the other person. But basically, it's a good chance to comment on Vivian, because what I love with this video is, you're right, all the distortions we suffer from influences during our life change or alter or distort our primary setup, and the video shows the primary setup. And what I try to show to the couple is that's where we want to go back to, because when you're in love, the interaction with a loving couple isn't much different from what you see with that video, and that's why everybody connects with it. It's like a set point of a positive interactional pattern,
To
and
do
the
in the world. And
experiment
that's
comes
really
in
what
the
the
second
baby
part.
is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby.
Okay, so that's the point where I introduce the 5 basic emotions based on Ackman's concept. And we saw joy or happiness in the first part of the video because both mother and child were happy or contented in the first part. So if the relationship is resonant and the needs are fulfilled, we feel happy or contented. So we already had the first positive emotion. So there are 4 negative emotions left, which is fear, sadness. Ackman calls it disgust, but I wind it down and call it feeling annoyed, because disgust is hard to communicate in a couple. So I tune it down and call it feeling annoyed and angry. These are the 4 negative basic emotions. And then to make it easier, I order them in 2 pairs, call it the vulnerable side, which is more sad or anxious, and the more activated side, which is annoyed or angry. So these are the 2 pairs, and then you have again a polarity. And I asked them, okay, if you look at this child, is the child more reacting in a vulnerable way with fear or sadness, or more in an activated, annoyed, angry way? And what is your answer? What do you read in the face of the child?
Yeah.
It's more fearful. And again, you see, if you offer the 2 options, it's so easy for the couple to make the choice, and they still feel competent to make a choice. And I think we all agree it's more on the blue, on the anxious, vulnerable side. And the second part I show at that point is, how long does it take the child to react?
Instantaneous.
200 milliseconds. It's a precognitive emotion. Basic emotions are precognitive emotions, and their function is that they signal something to our mind. This is their mission. That's the mission of the basic emotions. And if you have the vulnerable side, primarily feeling fear or maybe sadness, shows that or indicates that our attachment need is not met. The signal is, oh, your mother's not responsive. Be careful, your attachment need might be frustrated. Do something. That's the mission of fear, making us more cooperative. So we can call it constructive fear, because when you're a bit fearful, you open up towards the other person and become a bit more open and cooperative. When you feel anger, the impulse is to get active and bring your agenda through. That's the opposite of that's the constructive anger part of Les Greenberg, where he says the anger power helps us to go for our assertiveness need in this polarity of attachment and assertiveness directed behavior. Does it make sense? Okay, so this is our agenda. So we have the attachment threat. Mother's face is still. The child reacts with a fear-tainted reaction. And now the third part is need, frustration, emotion, and now comes the action, the behavior. What do you think the child will do now, driven by this emotion? And that's what Adorno calls it. The child does it the nice way, the good way.
Because very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points.
But the point is, the key point is, the child is not yet activated. There's no sympathetic activation. The child is still in peace. And this is a very, very soft startup to reconnect with your partner. Just say, hey, I'm here. There's something wrong. Let's fix it. And by the way, that's what a loving pair does. If you are in a honeymooning phase of a relationship and your partner is not listening, not coming, not reacting, if you call them to come to dinner, what do? And when you base your interaction on trust, you do it in a nice way, because it's about trust and not about control. It's about trust. And that's what the child is doing, because it's a healthy child, it's a safely attached child, but that's the good way to reconnect, doing it softly, just knocking a bit more and say, hey, I'm here. And if the mother would have reacted, everything would be fine. No trauma, nothing. Everything's okay. And that's the best way to fix it. And that's exactly what I tell the couple. And from the etiological perspective, that's the best thing a group of people can do and can work on, to use mentalization functions, quick check backs, to reconnect within a group, because a group that is able to solve these irritations in this soft way quickly without much friction saves energy. They don't need to eat that much, because when they are in a parasympathetic state, this is the most economic state of our body. Whenever we go into sympathetic state, we need energy, we need glucose, we have a cortisol display, and this is energy consuming. So if you imagine a group of Stone Age people, in late winter, early spring, those who are able to remain in a parasympathetic state will have more to eat. And those who always struggle on their sympathetic state will run out of their savings, and they will have nothing to eat. They will starve. So I think we are survivors of people who are able to keep their sympathetic activations low, connect in a parasympathetic way very effectively. We are good group team players, and that's why we survived. And this is our set point, this is our default mode, and that's what the child is doing. But that's only one way to do it. Imagine, and the mother is not reacting now, the mother is still not reactive, so the child has a plan B based on its biology, and we all know what happens, because now the child shifts. And I invite you to take a very close look about the shifting emotions. Now the child shifts from
The baby
sadness,
puts both hands up in front of
to
her
sadness, and now it
says,
becomes more annoyed.
"What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this?
Okay, you saw the shift. You saw how the motions start. So the sympathetic activation kicks in and the child becomes active, and now it needs energy to do that. But shifting to the angry side is helpful, because what you saw, the child now is able to cry, to shout. And again, back to Stone Age. Picture yourself walking through a meadow, you're the last one, you tumble, fall, your group goes on, walking away, and you say, hey guys, I fell down, could you please wait a minute? And they can't hear you. What do you need now if you want to survive?
Sympathetic arousal.
Exactly. You need the power, the energy to shout and say, hey, stop. But this second plan, this plan B, having the option to do it the hard way when the soft way is not working, significantly broadens our scope of interventions. And this is also necessary to survive, to be able to get into a powerful state, fight for your needs, for assertiveness, for control, for your side of the coin, to be sure that when the going gets tough, you have a plan B. So that's a good setup for us. But we shouldn't play too long, because otherwise we run into this energy problem. So like Porks told us, the dorsal vagal branch helps us. No, it's the ventral vagal brain helps us to cool down, because that's a sign of maturity to be able to cool down again quickly. Okay, and by the way, the child reacted in the last part. This is how we call our partners 10 years later when we're no longer in love. You call them for dinner, they're not coming, and you tell them, can't you come when I call you? So that's the course of a couple. You can show it to the couple that they become rougher to each other. And it's not a bad idea to be a little bit more polite, like we started from. Okay, so that's the second plan. If it's not working the soft way, do it the hard way. But the mother is still not reacting. And by the way, another important part, you can show the shift from the primary fear to the secondary anger. That's what Les Greenberg describes with primary and secondary emotions. And that's the history of all this overcompensate, not all, but all secondary overcompensatory personality disorders, these narcissistic, histrionic, over-controlling people, because they have a basic vulnerability, but they learn to compensate their vulnerability schema by a more dominant behavior. And this part of the video is so important to show all these narcissists, these overcompensators, these overcontrollers, how they changed the side from a victim to a more offensive state. And that's so helpful because you don't tell them to the face, the video tells it. So you have a joint perspective. We both look at the video and they can see the shift. And you just have to show, have you seen what happened? The child started being anxious, but then there comes a second layer of a secondary anger that covers the fear, and the child feels more active, more assertive. And all these narcissists forgot about their fear. So that's the perfect starting point for an empathic confrontation, showing them, okay, I see your angry side, now your annoyed side. But what is on the backstage? What is behind? Maybe there's another part of you in the shade that is not angry, which has another need and another feelings. And you can add another chair, and it's so easy to access that part if you offer both emotional positions and don't fix them on one or the other. Okay, so now, unfortunately, the mother is not reinforcing the narcissistic child part, which would happen if she would react now. And that's another part you can show them. If the mother would react, the child would learn. That's the way to do it. And usually that's the learning history of the narcissistic dominant overcompensatory clients, that they have been reinforced along the way for their dominant compensatory behavior. But the mother is not allowed to react, so there's a plan C. That's the third option. Okay.
Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn.
And that's the third option. You know, the child turns away. Are you aware what the child is looking to? It's the cameraman. Because behind the camera is a cameraman, of course. So if you have a couple in the room, you say, okay, that's the starting point of an affair. If you don't get what you need in your relationship, you are inclined to turn away and look for what you need with somebody else. So that's a normal physiological reaction, caring for yourself, if your needs are not met. So this is the self-soothing part. Unfortunately, the cameraman is not permitted to react. Now we come up to Agata's point.
In a way, they feel the
We have a
stress
plan
of
D.
it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. And this now is the starting point of the detached protector, of the shutdown, of the freezing part. Because if you parallel the 4 steps with the animal model from Cannon, it's submission, first try, dominance, second try, fighting. Then you have the flight, try to escape, and now we have the freezing part, getting frozen, getting stuck, getting into dissociation, shutting down. And that's obviously the worst part, the worst choice. So not incidentally, it's the last one. That's what's left for the child. If nothing else works, trying to shut down. But that's the starting point of depression, of fear, of all the bad Axis 1 symptoms deriving from detachment. So, and if you have a couple, you can ask them, what do you feel looking at this child? And what do you think is their answer? Yeah, of course they feel compassion. And what you said, Mary, we all love these, we all care for these little creeps, you know. And that's what I say. Yeah, but that's what you need for your partner as well. If you learn to understand that behind this arrogant, dominant facade, there is still a vulnerable part inside, like this little child mode. That's the child, but inside it's the child mode. If you get aware of this backstage child, be nice to it, care for it, connect with it. It's not biting, it's not bad. It's a poor, vulnerable part inside of each of us, because we were all born that way. We are all birds of a feather. And this is priming a sense of caretaking in the therapy at a very early state, because we will all, even men, feel sorry for this child. And if they don't, that's a bad sign. Then you have an autist or a very, very closed up person, and they need individual sessions to open them up. So that's a clear indicator how much compassion or mentalization skills and compassionate feelings are available within an observer, because this is like an acid test for compassion. If you don't feel anything watching that child, you are a lost case, or almost. You have a hard way to go, long way to go, hard climb. Okay, so, and then we're at the end, and that's the crazy part, because we have another 15 seconds left. And if you go there to the third part.
Okay. I'm here.
Okay, two options for interpretation. The first is, what is the mother doing? Which role does the mother take now? It's a kind of a top dog part, because she's very dominant. She takes the arms of the child, opens them forcefully without a written consent, by the way, yeah, and gets in a very active role. So she's red, but with a blue core. You can see she's doing it on a good purpose, but she's very, very active. But first interpretation, do you recognize yourself as a good reparenting schema therapist dealing with a detached protector client? I think this is basically Jeff's legitimation, why he says, if you have a child or a client in a detached protector, a deeply disappointed person, starting from this shut down state we saw before, and is still withdrawn, still behind the wall, deeply frustrated by other people. You have to take such an active role to break through these protector walls. One way or the other, we can discuss the details. And this video gives us the legitimation. So that's the first part. But the second part is, look at the child. How is the child reacting? Not at all. So if you have a client who is reluctant to react to our reparenting efforts, we as a therapist need a plan B to do some empathic confrontation with them, try to bypass the wall in another way, for example, standing up together, observer stance, healthy adult mode, talking about the situation down there, trying to access the vulnerable, compassionate or emotional side behind the wall in another way. We need flexibility as therapists to be able not to get stuck if we are active in our reparenting part and the clients remain resistant. We need a plan B or C ourselves, because it's in the hand of the client to give in and reconnect. And as well for the depressed clients in our individual therapy, but also, for example, for a betrayed partner. If the woman now is the betrayer because she left the child and now comes back and says, hey, I'm here, I do everything I can, what are you doing? And the betrayed partner says, yeah, but I can't forgive you. You hurt me too much. The first cut is the deepest. I'm so sorry. I could never. How can I dare to trust you again? Yeah. And that's a problem. So if I have a betrayal or an affair issue on the agenda, I show them the video and tell them, hey, your partner can't do nothing more than being here now, because he made mistakes in the past. Okay, you can put it that way. But if he's here now, fully present, willing to connect, he can't or she can't do more. And the power is in your hands. If you don't give in, if you don't give it a try, emotionally, finally, it won't there won't be no reconnection. The power is in your hand, and it's your choice to trust again or stay in control. If you stay on the red leg, detached, controlled, suspicious, there will be no emotional attachment connection because you stop it. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility because you're the only one to change it. Your partner can't do anymore. And that's a great part of that video. Unfortunately, the child is okay.
Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
And you can feel the relief once more. And the people feel it when they see how reconnection feels. And it touches us if you see it in the video. Okay, so if we now go back to our clash card, let me go here. So for the last 5 minutes, and maybe we will have to discuss it later, you can see that's the chain of modes we see along the way of the video. It's like a chain reaction, one mode following the other. And if we put it now into the two-leg model, we will have the attachment need, that's the need level, with the polarity of openness to other people, thinking in terms of the we, like Dan Siegel put it, and parasympathetic state, pro-social side. You can line up a lot of features of this blue orientation. On the other hand, the red orientation, where you're more self-centered, you're at the I side, the ego part. But it's necessary for autonomy, for control. So that's okay as well. It's not, the blue leg is not better than the red one. It's about balancing. And that's the first layer, is the need level. Need frustrations lead to the basic emotions, here still discussed. And then we have the third level, is the displayed behavior in the animal model between dominance, submission, and detaching or withdrawing. So these are the two trajectories: need, emotion, action. And of course, this is fine-tuned by critic modes tying into the process. But basically, looking at the emotional drivers, it's need, frustration, emotions, behavior. And on top of it, the head of it is the healthy adult mode, trying to keep the thing together in a more balanced, more centered way. And Dan Siegel coined it the we state, where we balance me and we. So that's a nice wording how to put it. And I just inserted it here because I like his idea of merging these poles into one. If you go to the clash card, to the mode map, you'll have the two poles here in terms of the vulnerable side. When fear comes up, when attachment needs frustrated, you have the angry child reaction following assertiveness frustrations, and you can point out the shift from primary fear to secondary anger. And you have the spectrum of the 4 coping modes with the dominant first line reaction, for the compliance surrender first line reaction, the secondary overcompensation, the detached self-soother, the detached protector, as the 4 ideal typical reactions you see in the video. And on the top you have the integrated version of these polarities, turning submission into cooperation, tune it down to cooperation. You have the overcompensator, tune it down to persistence or taking a certain firm stance to not be blown away. You have the disidentification part, letting things go, disidentify, detach in a good way, not to cut your feelings off, but let them go, which is a healthy distancing. And you have self-care or self-compassion as the adult way to deal with self-soothing impulses. So you have the polarity of externalization, internalization in terms of red and blue as the poles, and you have the integrated version as how an adult plays it out in a more moderate, flexible, balanced way, and matching your needs with the needs of the other person. So that's the idea of the map, with the 2-leg model behind it, and the video as a joint perspective to understand on an emotional level how these processes work and how the child tries to balance. And this is how to put it on the map. Okay, And that's why I love it. It brings something emotional into your work that you can always relate to and say, hey, you remember the video? And then you have, it pops up in the mind of the people, and whatever the state they are in, you can help them to tip a bit over to this set point you put with the video. I just start with framing their motorcycle in the first session, and then I usually start the second session and say, okay, I want to add something to the table, just showing you how interaction basically works, what our setup, all our setup is. And it's the second or sometimes the third session. It depends if there's very much material and it's difficult to organize it and to get connected. But latest the third session, and it changes the atmosphere. It's really, it's so helpful because it's not you telling anything, it's the video. And people believe in videos, you know. That's what I said. This is Mary said it, it's 21st century. They believe more in the videos than your talk. So you can support you can back up your authority with the video. Thanks for your interest. See you next time.